Welcome to my channel, your one stop for financial literacy. Remember that in order to secure your financial future, having the right education is key. So if you're yet to subscribe, kindly do so and turn on your notification to be first to know when a new video is out. So today's topic actually stemmed from an online argument I got into a few weeks ago, and I found an interesting post on Threads, which I will show you in a bit. This is the bio of the original poster. She's an investing coach, a Forbes contributor, according to her, and a CNN pod host. So essentially, she teaches investors how to slay the stock market, whatever that means. She has had over 7,500 students, and according to her, she gives award winning education. Well, I'm not here to question her credentials, but to speak to her posts. Now, let's read the post. So, the post goes: the cost of owning $500,000 in index funds for 30 years, $0. The cost of owning a $500,000 home for 30 years at 7% interest with 20% down is $558,000 in interest alone. Also, factor in taxes, maintenance, closing costs, HOA fees, etc. Before I show you my responses and counter responses, I first want to point out that this post has faulty premises. It's built on a false equivalence between buying a house and investing. The fact is this: there's zero competition between saving for the future and having a decent roof over your head. There's something called non discretionary spending. It's a necessity. So, whether you are renting or buying a home, you are fulfilling a basic necessity. It is comparing apples with oranges when you compare buying a home with $500,000 versus investing that money in index funds. So, before I go to my response, I want to point out the first error with the post. She says the cost of owning $500,000 in index funds for 30 years is $0. I wouldn't expect an award winning financial person to make such a rookie mistake. It's a basic error, and it makes me question any other financial education that this person gives. So I'm going to correct that in a bit. There are different fees in a mutual fund that companies are transparent and not transparent about. Now, emphasis is on the not. First, there's the expense ratio. This is usually a little less than 1%, but most investors are tricked to think that this is the only cost of their funds. So the expense ratio covers marketing costs, management fees, among so many other things. Now, there are other costs that most investors don't know about. So, when you check the fund prospectus, so before you buy a mutual fund, it's usually good to go through the prospectus. It tells you the cost and fees in that mutual fund. Well, for the most part, the only thing you're going to see would be information about the expense ratio. These other costs, they are not included in your prospectus. So, this prospectus, that guide that tells you about the index fund or the mutual fund, is not going to typically include the transaction cost. And this transaction cost can average up to 1.4%. Then there's taxes. The total cost that your mutual fund is going to experience, including tax costs, can be as high as 4% every single year. What we have here is an award winning Forbes contributor throwing misinformation about $0 cost in index funds. And this is very, very unbelievable. Now, let's get to my first reply. My first reply was, you can't live in an index fund. This brings us back to what I said earlier, that comparing investing and the necessity of having a place you call home is just false comparison. So you invest in the future, that's one thing. You find a home for you to live is another thing. I must say this, investing in the future is one important thing that everyone must do. I talk about that all the time. However, you are not going to sleep and raise your kids inside of your investment, right? Inside of your index fund. You need a home. Simple. Now, when I pointed that you cannot live in an index fund, what was our award winning response? The response is this: you can rent from the money that the index fund generates. Okay, it looks like it makes sense at first glance, but this is so ignorant. I was quick to point out this ignorance with my next response, then deplete it in no time. Now, no index fund, no home. How do I know this? Because I know math. Well, not trying to boast here. I have a PhD in engineering and I've done a lot of math in my lifetime. Well, I could predict what her next response would be, and I was not disappointed when she replied. Let's see her reply. If you don't understand safe withdrawal rates, just say so. First, that's a condescending reply, and this reply is a mishmash of condescending and ignorance, and I'll tell you why. The question is, what's a safe withdrawal rate? I'll explain that to you. It's the notion that the market historically makes a certain average every year, and based on that average, it's safe to withdraw a certain percentage of your funds and you would not deplete your money. That safe withdrawal rate is usually set by a lot of financial advisors at 4% of your principal. So, my next reply exposed the ignorance of the award winning CNN and Forbes contributor. This was my reply. Safe withdrawal rate on a small nest of $500,000 is around 4% per year. 20K per year would not pay the rent of a house worth $500,000. Also, if you start withdrawing from the first month, then safe withdrawal rate would not help since there's a sequence of growth. Safe withdrawal rate is screwed too during a bad year. Let me explain what I meant. First and foremost, if you started paying rent every month from your $500,000 nest, right from the first month that you invested the $500,000, that amount that you have removed in the first year would not see growth in that year. You took it out, so no growth. You have spent it. You did not grow. It did not experience, whether it's even a growth or a downward trend, it's not going to experience that. You have spent it, so it did not grow in year one. Now, most likely, you would have less than $500,000 after the first year because right after you put in money, you began to take the money out. That's not a way to grow money. There's nothing safe about investing and pulling money out of your investment from day one. Number two, there are no guarantees in the stock market. Sometimes the market will experience a downward trend and you would have to sell to pay your next rent. That's double trouble. The market was down and you removed money from the market at the same time. Now, let me tell you about the big lie of accumulating money in the stock market, either via mutual funds or individual stocks. There's something that your financial advisors don't say most of the time, and there's something that they say. What financial advisors don't say most of the time is that there's a difference between average returns of the market and actual returns. I will explain this with an illustration. Let's talk about the big lie of accumulation. And I would use an illustration of an investment of $1,000. and we are putting this $1,000 in a certain stock. And this stock in the first year makes minus 50%. So it means that of your original investment of $1,000, you have lost 50%. After 1 year, you have $500. But now let's assume that the second year was great and it was a positive year. You make 50% in the second year. First year minus 50, second year 50%. A lot of people who have not thought about the math will say, oh, we'll get back to 1,000. After all, we lost 50, we gained 50 again. No, you're not getting back to 1,000. Your investment is not breaking even. You are at 750 as against $1,000 that you started from. So this shows us something pretty simple, that the average return is different from the actual return. What's the average return? Minus 50 plus 50 divided by 2. It gives you 0%. But the actual return is 750 minus $1,000. That's 250 divided by your initial investment of $1,000, bringing you to a percentage actual return of minus 25%. So this is what happens when you have money in the stock market. Now, just imagine that this sequence of actual return is taking place, and in the same breath, you are withdrawing money for rent. So you are not giving that money, you are not giving your funds enough time to recoup and to bounce back. There will be upward trends and there will be downward trends. With this understanding in mind, do you think there's any safety as she claims? Well, if we assume that there was some safe withdrawal rate of 4% every year, can someone tell me how 4% of $500,000, which is equal to $20,000, would pay the rent of a house with the equivalent standard of the house that should have bought for $500,000? So I am super convinced that this person did not know what she was talking about. But her reply gets more ridiculous. So let's see the next one. The example is a 30-year period. $500,000 in 30 years will be worth $5 million. Really? My response to that was, you mean you'd wait for 30 years before you find a house to live? Or after removing safe withdrawal rate, you will still have 5 million? Which? Once you are spending the money inside your investment fund, it is not growing to $5 million. What you'd have after a few years would actually be more like $500. Since she had no other mathematically valid point, so she went back to her original misinformation. And let's read that. You are missing the point of the post, which is about cost. So she says, I am missing the point about cost. Like I explained earlier, the cost in a mutual fund can be more than 4% every year when you include tax costs and all the hidden fees your financial advisor does not tell you about. Well, I responded to that. You are missing the point about math. You would have no index fund and no home when you spend a $500,000 nest on rent. Something else that she missed is that most of the time, your home goes up in value. So if you need money and your home has added more value, you can always borrow money from the equity of the house. You could rent out a room or even the basement of the home. Also, if I had $500,000 to buy a home, there will be no mortgage costs since I'll be buying outright. So everything about that post is just wrong. If you asked me, would you rather buy a home or invest in an index fund? My reply would be you are comparing two different things. Let's get things clear. Do both. Find a nice place to live, either by renting or buying, It's never a straight answer. Which one is better? Should I rent? Should I buy? You'd find lots and lots of argument for buying, lots and lots of argument for renting. But the point is, find a nice place to stay. Also, grow money for the future. So, one way I prefer to grow money is that I want to grow money in a portfolio that would never have a downtrend. So, watch out for future videos where I will show you how to grow money without ever experiencing a downtrend. And if you cannot wait, well, send me a DM or send an email to the email address in the description of this video and we can schedule a session. Till next time, take care of yourself and spread love to others. Thank you.